Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sloppy Lab. I am JT Russell, and I'm here to tell you that if you find yourself against an opponent playing turn 1 Quixel Stone and you have just one Hawk in your deck, sure does help when your name is also your game plan. And my co-host tonight knows all about that. Quick draw that Hawk. Am I right, Quick Draw?
That is correct. That is the key. Draw better cards. If you can't do that, just get better.
Just draw better, draw better, draw better. Quickly.
Draw quicker. Draw quicker.
Quickly. Yeah, and of course I am referencing the Kagi Top Cut match that you had with our fellow teammate, JDG 314. That was quite an epic battle. It was actually a lot of fun to watch. I think we mentioned it. We may have mentioned it last time. I don't recall. But if folks haven't checked it out before, it's up on, I believe it's on Floximal's channel, but they were co-commentating with Zach Armstrong. And yeah, greatly commentated, greatly played. It was just a masterpiece all around. So it was a lot of fun to watch.
I'm glad to hear that. It was a really fun game to play. Thought I was dead in the water a couple times during that match and somehow got away with it. And definitely watched the video on demand as well because Orion and Zach are just super entertaining to watch. So highly recommended. Give them a follow too. They make every game fun, even Quixelstone games.
Even Quixelstone games. Like those people bemoan Quixelstone and Heart of the Forest, but like that was a like very dynamic game, like heavy thinking, like
Yeah.
it wasn't just kind of a snooze fest, discard your card, discard everything, play your pips, and walk to victory. It was like lots of back and forth, lots of interaction.
Yeah. Well,
Very
having
cool.
some R in a Quixel game makes it a lot more interesting. And that's not just because you can get the Quixel off the board sooner, but you have to get it off at the right time. So I
Hmm.
just think it adds like an extra element to it where you're like, do you hold the Hawk until they get the stone down? Things like that. Even Grasping Vines, which I had in my deck as well, is another
Hmm.
interesting play with it. Because like, do you play the Grasping Vines for some disruption to put the Quixel Stone back and then unload a bigger board of Untamed? Things like that. You have options. But you're right, totally like a thinker when you're playing with a Quixel Stone and some counterplay. Some really good games. JDG obviously always a huge challenge. So really fun games.
Yeah, the teammates are the best and the worst opponents, right? They know you're thinking, they know the back
Yeah.
room brewing, and we've got. I mean, it's unfortunate to have friendly fire, but you can only avoid it so long. But now you are looking across the aisle of the bracket, as it were, and seeing Not Tonight advance there, and it will be cool to see you all meet in the
Uh,
finals. Fingers crossed. Don't want
trying,
to jinx it. Don't want to jinx it.
yeah, trying not to look ahead. Like we have to get through. I have to get play Algernon, who's an amazing player. I think he was a former Kagi champion, and then Ashitaka is not tonight's opponent, and he has been second place, I think, at least twice in Kagi.
Hmm.
Um, so like the Kagi top cut is always insane talent, great players. So I am would love it if not tonight and I could play in the finals. It'd be tons of fun. But we have our hands full already in
Yeah,
the
and at
semis.
and at this point, it's sort of just an achievement to have made it this far, regardless, right? I mean, I say often, and I think this is also uh, going to be very relevant to our topic for this show. But I tend to value sustained performance over time versus spiking an event here and there, right? So, I mean, look at yourself and Not Tonight, who have very very strong track record of making these top cuts against some fierce competition. Like that speaks a lot. And I mean, I know she won. She won one recently. Are you looking for the first one here?
Oh no, I won Kagi 4, I think it was.
Oh yeah, yes, against Ashitaka, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was. So
Yes.
that's what I mean. Like Ashitaka, I think got second last season. He got
Okay.
second against me. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm obviously like very proud of the fact that I've made 6 of 7 top cuts in Kagi. Just the consistency, like, is just very super proud of that. Like, it's always a tough tournament, and I love the adaptive format, and it's just really cool to say that I've had this
Hmm.
sustained success. There have been no repeat champions yet, though, and pretty good chance this season sees a repeat of some sort, unless Ashitaka comes out.
Yeah. So yourself and Not Tonight. I don't know if Algernon are.
I thought Algernon did. I could be mistaken. I mean, he's always in the top cut,
Yeah.
so
Well, you say that, but I
I
don't know if he's really started playing in them until too recently. I mean, he lost a finals to Not Tonight. We'll have to double check the records, but either way,
yeah
a strong competitor for sure.
yeah if Murph is Fudginator's around, I definitely would be very interested in the Kagi historian.
Hmm.
Would love to see some more details of that documented. It's been a great tournament, great league that's been going on for 7 seasons now.
Cool. Well, right on, right on. Well, enough preamble, resting on our laurels, as it were. What are we talking about this evening?
Yeah, so tonight we have a really interesting topic that was suggested to us by none other than Arlie of
Hmm.
Team Weekend. Weekend Key Warriors, I believe, is the podcast name.
Hmm.
Sounded like this was a topic that they didn't think they would cover. Was kind enough to pass it on to us. We both kind of grappled onto it and really enjoying this one. It's RPS of KeyForge, rock, paper, scissor, if you're not familiar with the term.
Hmm.
In gaming, it is largely considered a negative thing where you have different matchups that tend to trump each other, and you have one that will, like, deck A will beat deck B, and deck B will beat deck C, and deck C will beat deck A. And we're going to talk about how that relates to KeyForge decks, what that means for the competitive scene, and whether or not we think that's a good thing in KeyForge.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I have up on the screen for folks who are here with us on the stream, but we'll do our best to convey this for the audio folks. I have up on the screen responses from a survey that we did some time ago when we revisited the Lux Skill deck idea that was first put out, our topic that was first put out by the Timeshapers podcast. So definitely go back and give ours a listen. First, give theirs a listen, and once you're all done that, come back here and I'll resume this episode.
Or you just continue watching live if you want.
Yeah. But we got a number of responses, but very interesting to see kind of how folks broke down or what they thought the various elements between luck, skill, and deck, to what degree they contributed to the outcome of a match. And I guess as relates to RPS, this rock, paper, scissors idea, folks thought on average that 35-ish, 36% of the match outcome was determined by the deck that you brought. So interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is very interesting, and there's a pretty good range here. So the max was a 60% that someone said, and the low was a 15%. And I'm going to out myself as I did in our original Lux Skill deck episode. I was actually the person that put in 15 there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I filled out this, I think I was going under the assumption that we're talking about high-level games. So if you show up to an Archon tournament and you're facing the best of the best, like say like the top cut of an Archon tournament, that's kind of what I had in mind when I gave this answer, because I really feel that the deck itself, like if you've made it that far, your deck is good enough to win, and then it's going to come down to either your play skill, which I put at 60, or the luck of the draw during the game, which I put at 25% in that game. So I don't know. I think I stand by that. I think that's a still like roughly where I'd put it. Maybe I'd bump deck up a little bit, but that could just be me being influenced by the average of the rest of the responses, around 35%. But it's relevant here because what we want to talk about really is the decks themselves and the matchups that they have. And one of the examples that Arlie gave to us when he was talking about this topic was Not Tonight's infamous Rector deck, which low rated by SAS, but it just can annihilate some competition.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context of what Arlie was talking about, like he got trounced by it at one point, and then he brought a totally different deck and just completely turned the matchup around. And so it kind of sounds like a bad thing where it's like, okay, well, just depends on what deck you bring and if you can win or not. But I think there's way more depth to this topic and how it can relate to competitive KeyForge, where, deck is a factor, but there are formats that kind of mitigate that element of the negative side of that, of how that impacts it.
Mm-hmm. So when you say 15%, I agree with you. I'm with you that for these numbers, I'm looking at them as, we're bringing maybe this is Archon solo, or just we're pitting one deck against another in a very highly competitive, best of the best, bring your best deck sort of environment. It's not like, oh well, heck, I brought my reversal candidate and you brought your Archon heat, and I just don't have a chance. So how can it be 15%? We're not talking about that.
Yeah.
So 15%. Yeah, I think I was in the 20% range. And I guess that would mean that, on paper, um, before you account for skill or kind of luck of the draw, just on paper, just the deck, assuming, an equal pilot and kind of equal grace from Lady Luck, it's going to be 60-40 at best or worst, kind of as on average,
Hmm.
which yeah is not insignificant, mind you. Like I
Right.
think not insignificant. Yeah.
So let me just start by asking you: is rock paper scissors element the RPS in KeyForge? Do you consider this a good thing, a bad thing? Is this a feature or a bug?
Yeah. And I feel like I say this often on our conversations, but my opinion on this has shifted a lot. And if you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said it's a terrible thing. And now I embrace it. I like open my arms, welcome it in. I say like this is actually an awesome part of the game, an awesome part of playing this game competitively. Um, I think so. Oh, before I continue, let me what do you think? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's not only a good thing in KeyForge, I think it's essential, and I will get into
Mm,
that, into why I believe that later. But just for more background for myself and other games, this kind of RPS, and actually this specific term RPS in other CCGs that I've played, is actually thrown about as a major downside, a major negative aspect to the game. They don't want to play a CCG or a game where there is that RPS factor, where the deck you bring in the matchup you have is a high determining factor of the winner. So in other games, I do believe it's a bad thing, but KeyForge, it's crucial. It's a crucial element to KeyForge's success and just playability and long term viability, in my opinion.
hmm Sure. I mean, and even if we're taking kind of the low hanging fruit off that, like let's consider the alternative, right? If there is no well, every counter has a counter sort of um, element to the environment, then you get into this kind of the strict ordering, and you really like if KeyForge were a game where you can't modify your decks, and there was a ladder you can climb on deck strength, and there's no way to kind of foil the one that's above you with something else. I think that's just really really kind of bad scene, right?
Hmm.
I I I love SAS a lot. I spend a lot of time on DOK, um, but I think we can all agree that it's impossible to give one number that's going to predict the outcome, but of any two given matches. Like it'll tell me directionally how strong things are, how can I kind of get a sense for the synergies at play and how strong or weak those are. But there's never going to be one number I can assign universally, and it's going to tell me the outcome of any two given matches, and that I think is a really good thing. Um, if anything, I would have said that my kind of position on this question has shifted from like, oh, maybe RPS is not good, maybe this like RPS kind of effect is not good, to it's actually good, but maybe like Archon solo uh, is not as great of a format as we can do if we're looking to kind of test skill, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
I'm very glad you mentioned SAS scores because I think, you know, we talk on our team a lot about how SAS is and everything, and I really feel like RPS is a great way to describe why it's not everything. I think people, especially if you're looking in casual games or just the general online community, there's always talk about like, oh, well, your deck's like the SAS is too high, I don't want to play against it. But the RPS means that like you can beat that deck, and that's totally cool. Like that's fine. We love decks of KeyForge, and
hmm
I still am just very skeptical of putting, you know, more than a like small amount of weight into SAS. And this is why, because you can have a deck that's a 75 and it could beat a 90, but it could also lose to a 55. You just don't know. And this is in my opinion, a feature of the game, not a bug, because I think if you ask someone what is the best deck in KeyForge that exists, and like ask that question to someone who is very experienced with a lot of the best decks, a lot of the online competitive scene, and you're going to get a different answer from everybody. You might have like one deck pop up once or twice, But the interesting thing is that not a single deck that's mentioned is ever going to go undefeated in a tournament, or rather,
Mm.
it's not going to do it repeatedly. You might have tournaments. You certainly have tournaments where someone goes undefeated, but you can't just bring that same deck everywhere and go 8-0 every single time you bring it. And this is why RPS is necessary in KeyForge, because if you had that deck, if everyone could agree, yep, this deck right here, this is the best deck that exists in KeyForge, period, bar none, the game would probably die, or at the very least, Archon best of one, or even best of three would die, because if what's the fun anymore at that point? If there is a single deck out there that is the best deck,
Mm.
you need this element. And I think part of the genius of the design of this game was the houses each having a different and unique identity, and being limited to 3 houses in a deck really limits the scope of what your deck can do. No deck is able to cover every base of efficiency, amber control, amber generation, and then all these other wild card factors like a mimicry or a miasma or a key cheat. Like you can't. No deck exists that covers every one of those bases. And I didn't even mention artifact control either. And this is why it's so great. If you find that unicorn deck, like good for you, because I don't know if it's out there. Um, and it's a really really good thing. I don't know if I'd still be interested in this game if there was a single deck out there that was the best that existed.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you asked me to come to a tournament knowing that there is like an actual unbeatable kind of deck, even just in existence, I'd probably say, like, but it's solved, right? And then and we may have ideas about what's good or bad in the environment and the meta currently, but yeah, I don't think they're well. I'm yet to see. You can't prove the non-existence yet unless we go through everyone individually, I guess. But I am yet to see a deck that I'm like, yeah, that actually just doesn't lose, right? Or there's nothing that I could bring if my goal was just to beat that deck.
Yeah. I don't want to dwell on this point I'm about to make, but I would believe in Alliance there is probably a deck out there that is the best deck in KeyForge.
Hmm. I think it's probably something that you can push the needle closer to, and I think that's ironic because probably the idea, one of the kind of founding ideas of Alliance is to give folks more agency, right? Because you want to feel like you have the tools to craft something that maybe gives you a better foothold in meta. But this maybe is an interesting segue, if we're not going to dwell on that how do some other games deal with it? I mean, this is a thing that comes up in Magic, so I can speak to that a little bit, and it's very much used as a derogatory term, like, oh, the environment is solved, we're waiting for the next set. It's basically we're in RPS land right now, waiting for kind of the next set to drop and shake things up,
Yep. That's exactly what came to mind for me too, is like waiting for a new expansion or issuing errata to, take something back a little bit. Or maybe you introduce fewer deck types. If you have too many deck types, that could increase the variance in the RPS involved in that meta. You want to make it a little bit more predictable to say, like, these are the possible viable decks at the top level scene. And we want to make sure that this set of like 5 to 6 decks are competitive against each other. And so you try to control it in a way where, if you have more than 7 or 8, you can't control that. It's very difficult to control all the matchups that are possible with that many decks. So you might want to limit the number of decks you make. But a new expansion is generally the way to shake it up. And inherently in that comes power creep of some sort and a lot of other things that, interestingly enough, might be good for KeyForge, but are not good for other games.
It is super cool. And I should mention too, just a quick note, I am wearing a Magic the Gathering shirt, so haters, don't send me your hate mail. I'm a fan, but it's a interesting counterpoint for this discussion, especially considering that Magic has a tool baked in to kind of combat this, right? So you sit down to a Magic game, you're bringing typically a 60 card deck, right? Plus a 15 card sideboard. So in a best of 3 setting, for the games 2 and 3, you're changing the configuration of your deck, kind of with the idea that, okay, if I do bump into a nightmare matchup, I'm going to have some tools that let me shift and adjust. Not a thing that we have in KeyForge, though I almost think that we handle we have some tools, kind of larger scale tools to handle it. But yeah, interesting. I don't know. Does Star Wars CCG have any kind of similar
No,
concept?
no sideboard whatsoever. So what you bring is what you get. But I was just going to say actually that KeyForge happens to have a mechanic to fix
Mm,
this as well in the form of chains.
in the form of
Um,
chains.
you can't
Mm,
really do that in a competitive event and just say, oh well, my deck's better than yours, in a high level tournament. But if you're playing casually with friends and they're like, well, your deck's just way better than mine, like, well, okay, then you have a built-in mechanic to make it a more interesting game. And Go has mechanics like that too. Like, you think this isn't just like a new concept of, adding a handicap or chains or things like that. Like, Go is one of the oldest games that there is, and they have the same kind of mechanic where a more experienced player, against a less experienced player, the less experienced player can have pieces to start the game on the board. It's perfectly fair. It makes it a more balanced game. And I don't know. I think people should embrace that part of KeyForge, but you know, a lot of people don't really appreciate chains
mm.
for what they're intended for.
Yeah, and we have an interesting comment in the chat here too, that sideboards entirely change up the meta for some games. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think it's, well, a little bit of a distinction from maybe how Go does things, or even the chains in KeyForge, right? Like, chains will help with disparity of strength on like an absolute scale, at least in theory. That's kind of their idea. But if you sit down with Heart of the Forest and I have no R, no way to interact with your combo, and it's just a situation where, well, if you land that heart, you can set it up such that, given as much time as you want, right, you're gonna win,
Yeah,
right? And chains can mitigate that to an extent, right? Like, we can find some number of change such that it's 50-50 whether or not you find the heart, um, but not necessarily. We're not really kind of leaving us to have a contest of skill, right?
that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, just as a side note here, sidebar, we talked at the beginning of the show about my matchup with JDG in Kagi.
Mm.
I had a few decks that I wanted to bring, but I knew that they would just absolutely like game's over as soon as Quixelstone hits the board. And I thought to myself, like, I could bring that deck. It's going to get annihilated, but then I have to get to the chain bidding game, and like it would come down to, does Quixel come down before, yeah, I can win the game? And
Mm.
you could bid 24 chains in that matchup. One of the ones I tested, I did not test with that many chains. It was just such a helpless matchup. It just could not generate amber. Where even if I bid 24, if Quixelstone comes out, you know, at some point before the end of the game, it's game over. Like that's that's all there was to it. And so I did not. Obviously, that's not good. A balancing mechanism in that regard. But on a casual level, if I'm playing, like my brother or my brother's girlfriend, I'm teaching them to play KeyForge. I could bring a deck, any deck, and just give myself a number of chains as the more experienced player. In fact, that's part of the new updated rulebook. They mentioned that chains as a balancing mechanic, where you give a experienced player start with 4 chains, and you play against a newer player with none, and you adjust that after a few games. It's actually something they added to the rulebook to talk about it. So um, I feel like, I don't know, that's a bit further afield from the RPS topic, but still tangentially related nonetheless.
Yeah, that's interesting. I I do like, I've come to embrace chains. I will admit, there was a time. It's one of those things that I was mentioning before, where I've shifted my position on a lot, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. But I do think there are tools that KeyForge has available to it that are good for um, kind of embracing the RPS nature. I'm not going to say like overcoming it, but embracing it and turning it into kind of a skill testing element. And that is to not have a single deck format, right? Have like a multi-deck
Mm-hmm.
format. Um,
Yeah.
so we had in our notes here, I think this was one of yours, but yeah, multi-deck formats kind of thrive in an RPS world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I love about the multi-deck formats, like the one that I think is most popular at the moment is Nordic Hexad, where you bring 6 decks, you ban, safe, ban, and then you play 3 of the 4 remaining decks that you have. Um, it's been really fascinating to discover this format because your gut instinct is like, oh, you need six really amazing decks to compete in that. But I found, and I think people that play this format more often will know this as well, that it's not about just bringing six amazing decks. You actually have to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they interact with other decks and archetypes, and you might say like, I'm deathly afraid of Infernus in
Mm.
my thing, and so you would just ban Infernus. So what these multi-deck formats, especially ones that allow for a ban, or at least a choice of some sort in which ones you play, they create a miniature meta where if you don't have this kind of closed environment of these multi decks that you're possibly going to face, then you have to account for everything. And so I can't show up to an event that's like a single elimination if I am like going to lose to an Infernus deck, because you're
Mm.
going to hit an Infernus deck and then you're out. But if you play in a format where you have a ban available to you, or you have a limited meta like this, like maybe my opponent brings in Nordic Hexad, maybe they have four Infernus decks, and so I can't ban them all, and I know that my decks will lose to them. Uh, what I can at least do is play my decks that don't lose to Infernus, and you have to craft your lineup in a way that accounts for that. And what's great about like how this relates to RPS really is that you don't need to have a deck that can beat everything and anything. You can just know your matchups, know your RPS well, so that when you pick out another deck that you could possibly face, you're choosing the right matchups and crafting yourself and positioning yourself in a way that you're able to win anyway.
Mm. It's so interesting that yeah, that you went to Hexad and not the OG Triad. Would you say that Hexad is a better multi-deck format than OG Triad?
Uh, I love OG Triad too. The only reason I went straight to Hexad is because it's more, I think, relevant to the current competitive game.
Mm.
Um, you know, I think OG Triad is not even an official format from Ghost Galaxy at the moment. Is that right?
Oh, well, neither is Hexad, and we don't. I don't know. I don't know. I think the Nordic folks are still trying to win over the GG. Show the Nordics some love, GG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish there was a old school Triad league. Like, I would love to play in a Triad league similar to Kagi, but for Triad.
Mm.
In fact, maybe we should run it. Like, gonna put us on the spot at the moment. Like, I think that'd be a fantastic league to
Mm.
do regularly, because I think the Triad is an amazing format for this. It is an even smaller meta than a Hexad, and also allows for a ton of skill without requiring like the three best decks that you own. You still have to craft a lineup of those three. I think it just leaves a little bit less room for leeway.
Mm.
I think Triad, my gut says you probably need a slightly higher uh, deck strength, a deck level and power than you do in Hexad. I don't know if you agree or
Yeah.
disagree with that.
Well, I actually do think that Hexad is a better multi-deck format than Triad, and a big reason for that is there is a deck in your Hexad lineup that you don't end up playing, right? So for the folks who aren't familiar, right, you bring six decks, two of them get banned, one of them gets safe, so it goes a ban from your opponent, then you protect one from the subsequent ban. A second deck gets banned, you're left with four decks that you can play for three matches, right? So one of those decks doesn't get played. So you right off the bat, you have some room to bring utility that you don't need to throw to the wolves when it's not the utility in that matchup, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to have this the special teams that only comes in when you actually need that special team to do things. And I don't know football, so hopefully that works. And
Nah,
hopefully
it
it's
doesn't. It doesn't really. But
doesn't really.
I'll give you a pass.
Okay.
You need special teams in football. It is like it's not something that you can just choose not to use.
Whatever. It's a
But
pinch
you know
hitter,
what?
but you didn't have to use the pinch hitter.
That's fair. All right, it's a pinch hitter, or you could even call it a sideboard.
Sideboard. It's kind of like having a sideboard, right?
It
So
really is. Yeah.
yeah.
If you have a your sixth deck in your Hexad that's just there for a very specific reason. I actually have a deck in my lineup that's kind of like, I can go to it and it's got a very high win rate. It has a couple like very specific bad matchups that I try to avoid, and if I don't have that, I'm feeling like, I could probably go to this in this time around.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the closest thing KeyForge has to a sideboard, is this format where you essentially end up with four decks and you only have to play three of them. So
Yeah.
you have the choice of like leaving one on the side, so to speak.
And there are spiritual success, or I guess relatives to that, right? So, but to finish the thought, I think Triad ends up being kind of defined by the weakest link in your matchup, and that creates a lot of pressure on all three decks to pull their weight
Right.
Across the board, right? Whereas multi-deck formats that don't require you to play every deck that you brought give you more room to get smart with your tools, essentially, and not have to have absolute fire in each slot, just as a baseline. So in terms of embracing the rock paper scissors ness of the KeyForge environment and kind of turning that on its head, whereas in Archon Solo, it could be frustrating, right? But in a multi-deck environment, it's maybe more of a tool that you can leverage and can become really skill testing. And I mean, I think there are some other formats that touch on this. I don't know if we want to go kind of toward talking single deck or single game formats yet, but yeah.
Before we pivot to the single deck formats, which I think there's a lot to talk about here, I just want to give a little shout out to one of our sponsors for the week. So this week's episode of Bottom of the Beaker is brought to you in part by the Piranha Monkey clothing line. Whether you're a Sanctum Knight or a Brobnar Brawler, Piranha Monkey has the perfect outfit to showcase your unique style. Piranha Monkey, clothes that scream, I'm a force to be reckoned with. So thank you, Piranha Monkey clothing line, for sponsoring this week's episode. So we can talk about the best of one formats and jump right back into those. You may have a hot take here on Archon Solo, is what I understand.
I mean, I don't think it's a fine format. I don't think it's a great format. I think that there are better. Well, I mean, I'm going to back up a little bit. I think KeyForge really, really needs a best of one, no chains, play your own deck format for the high level competitive scene, right?
Yeah.
Because lots of folks don't like chains, really don't like chains, will not do chain bidding, and chain bidding doesn't really make sense unless you're leaving the option on the table to play your opponent's deck, right? So like in adaptive best of one, and handing your deck to your opponent to play is just a non-starter for folks. And then kind of the other kind of factors there are kind of best of one versus best of three. I do think we kind of need best of three, or we need to kind of change hearts and minds around what's reasonable for like amount of time to allow for a game, right? Mm-hmm. So those already kind of eliminate things like Hexad, which requires 3 games, or even full adaptive, which is absolutely one of my favorite formats. Super skill testing, lots of fun, but plenty of folks don't like chains. Plenty of folks don't like handing over their deck for their opponent to play, or playing reversal games. And I get all the reasons for those. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it leaves a space in the game that really hasn't been hit in a great way, and I don't think is really hit yet in the offerings that GG's got on the table.
There was an offering that I thought was close. Essentially it was a triad best of one, right? And then that was very short-lived.
Sorry. The chat's got me chuckling. Oh, Murph, you got me good. There's always the possibility someone eats your deck in adaptive. Yeah, there is that possibility. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll riffle shuffle it real aggressively, or get their grubby hands all over my sleeves. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a problem passing my deck to the other side of the table, especially if it's adaptive. Just bring something that's not worth $500, and well, and voila, you have a great adaptive deck. So I mean, the best of one triad, that, if I'm not mistaken, was a format for a very brief time proposed by Ghost Galaxy, right?
They did have a best of one triad proposed, but I'll have to look back at what exactly what it was. I don't remember if it was Alliance, or there was some other quirk that made it not the best of one triad that we kind of looked at it and were like, yeah, but I don't know, it's kind of off. It had a kind of a weird smell. But
I forget what it was too now.
There was something, but best of one triad, at least as I've played it before, is you bring 3 decks, one of them gets banned by your opponent, and then you have 2 decks to choose one from to play against one deck that your opponent will play from the decks that they've got remaining unbanned, right? So it's 3 decks, one gets banned, and then you play a buy-add match, right? And that's super cool because it leaves a deck on the table. Oh, maybe it was, that's what it was. A deck that's banned in one round, like, can't be used in the next round.
Yeah.
And it kind of defeats the purpose of having a deck that you bring and use as a pinch hitter, special teams type thing. He says with his distaste to my metaphor. Yeah. So it kind of takes away the element of that element from best of one triad, which I think is what made it so great. Yeah. So I think
triad best of one normal is just a really, really good format.
It's a great format.
Joker hosted some tournaments of it right after Ghost Galaxy originally announced that as a potential format. He did it, I think, without the exhaustion, but we played it for like 1 week on a Friday night, and it was an awesome format. I mean, the turnout was small, and he was going to do it the next week, and right before the next week was going to happen, Ghost Galaxy was like, never mind, we're going to get rid of that one, which was, I thought a real shame because it was the first time I'd ever played that format, and it just really opened my eyes to the possibilities of like that best of one triad where you don't need to have 3 amazing decks, but it still comes back to that what I talked about with Hexile, where you're just bringing decks and knowing the matchups, knowing the mini meta that you're up against, and choosing the right matchup for that, and giving yourself a chance to allow your in-game skill to take over.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe we'll see it at some point. Maybe the Ghost Galaxy folks are secret sloppy fans listening in. But I do think it's a great option for a format where you want to showcase the best decks, but you also want to give folks some levers they can pull to kind of lean into this RPS-ness and not have it be a thing that's bemoaned, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there are other things that scratch that itch too. There's Biad, which is like that triad, but there's no banning. So you just go right to, okay, I've got these 2 decks. Let me look at your 2 decks and pick the one that I think matches up best. So I think that's not quite as good, but I also really like Oubliette, so I want to give a shout out to that. And we're going to be playing that in ABR later this season. I know you're less of a fan of some of the kind of restrictions that get placed on formats, but we can leave that discussion till later. I think it would actually be fun to have maybe an episode or maybe half an episode devoted to it. But
for sure.
Long story short is I think that there are options out there to showcase in a best of one, no chains, no reversal setting, the good decks and played well.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's crucially important because, like, as we talked about the competitive scene, and there was the KeyForge celebration last November. You're talking about what kind of events could you play that don't take until 2 a.m. to finish, don't make you change decks with an opponent, don't make you play chains, and like there's some really good options out there. And Archon Best of One is not the best one. It is an option. It is just not the best one.
And it's a classic. It's the Cadillac, you know.
Yeah. Got to have it still. Not by any means suggesting to get rid of it.
Yeah, totally. And while we're on the topic, I feel like we would be remiss not to give a shout out to at least coming to my mind, both Aurora and Karen have done a lot of work over the years on kind of experimentation and looking for formats that scratch various sides of this itch to get you to explore different parts of your collection, but while providing a competitive outlet. You know, we had Moirai mention that chat. I love Moirai. I think that it would have been an awesome format to be promoted. Like, I do think though that we need like a best of one format out there too, which makes it a little bit tricky. But I mean, Moirai is one of my favorite formats for sure.
There is just an announcement like literally minutes before we went on the air about Karen's Moirai League.
Oh, nice.
I didn't get to read it in detail, so I can't really like plug it, other than to say go check out the Discord servers, especially the Swindle Discord servers. Read about it there. I can't say anything else about it because I didn't get a chance to study it, but it's very exciting. It's a super cool format, and I don't know, maybe she has a Moirai Best of One format in there that I am not familiar with that could be good here.
Indeed. And welcome to DataForge Stream, the chat. We are all sloppy here. You're in a good place if you came for the sloppiness. Yeah, check out that Moirai League. I am going to be checking it out. Yeah, if there is a way to do best of one Moirai, that would be super cool. I think it really sets up some interesting decisions for lineup crafting that you just don't get anywhere else. And uh, this actually carries back to our Hexad lineups. I wanted to go a little bit deeper on there, and gets into kind of this idea of your sixth deck or your unplayed deck as sort of the sideboard. Now, when you were crafting your lineup, were you like, I'm going to bring my six best decks, six well-rounded best decks, and just kind of hope to match up well? Or did you have, I mean, I'm kind of teeing you up a little bit because you answered it already. Or was it a little bit more of like, well, there's some matchup crafting that's going to happen, and I'm trying to cover holes and present strengths to exploit?
So last season was my first NKFL season, and I got a little too cute. Like I should have just brought my six best decks because it was
Mm-hmm.
my first time. I was just trying to learn it. I instead brought one deck that I thought was like more of a niche, um, I don't know, kind of the toolbox deck we talked about, kind of like the wild card, the sideboard deck. Turns out it was just not a good enough deck, and I didn't know its matchups well enough. And so I ended up taking two losses with it and just like never played it again last season, which
Mm-hmm.
left me essentially with a five deck lineup. Um, this season I got a little bit better, but I may have like overcorrected a bit because I was really focused on creature control this season because I got kind of burned by it last season. And so I'm still like finding the sweet spot in my lineup of knowing the matchups, um, balancing that with like bringing my best decks and decks that I'm experienced with. So I don't really have a good strategy to say like, yeah, use that this year. But I mean, something's working for me so far um, in my group of death. Um, so I think maybe like if you're wondering about what to bring for your Nordic Hexad, I would say err on the side of a little bit too much creature control because the format just seems to have so many decks with runaway board state, and if you are up against someone who has like four or five of those in their lineup, you might just have to scoop twice if you're playing decks with low creature control.
Mm. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see the different ways that you can think about your lineup that are valid in sort of a hexad setting, and maybe you wouldn't really reach for in a triad setting, right? Like my lineup, I leaned really hard into the, I'm going to bring some decks that have these really pronounced strengths and some varied weaknesses, and try to well, hopefully play well, but more or less make my hay in the banning and selection phases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and I don't think that's something you can do as effectively. Like you can try in a triad setting to say like, well, I'm going to bring three decks that have the same strength, and then corner the one in my opponent's lineup that's most weak to that strength, right? But if it happens to not be, if you bring three rocks and they're like, well, I got all paper, you're just like derp, you know?
Yeah, that can
Um,
happen in Triad. Um,
yep.
and a similar thing happened to me in Triad ABR last season, I think it was. I brought um, three decks, and at least two of them were very weak to just like heavy, heavy rush. And my opponent brought three Coda Rush decks, and they banned my deck that was like viable against it, and I just got smoked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that can happen. Or even if you in Triad, even if you have one deck that can't beat a rush, and they bring three rush, you're going to get smoked twice with that deck, and you're done. So it's a less forgiving format, but um, yeah, I mean, I talked about creature control in my specific example, but I think depending on your pod in Hexad, your group, your personal experience, maybe it's like scaling Ember control is the bane of your existence, or maybe it's something different. Like that was just my limited experience in a single season. It could
Mm.
be different for everyone else though, but like kind of the same principle could apply.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it's interesting. I recently played in the KFPL. I have to make sure I get my acronyms straight. KFPL qualifier. That was a triad event. Super fun. I brought three decks that I thought would prey on typical mass mutation lists, and almost invariably, without exception, except for maybe one round, So with an exception, I think just banned the not mass mutation thing and set out. Let me roll the dice with their and see if the strategy holds up. So it's interesting, but it's a lot harder to do just that, and you have more tools to make sure you don't get burned leading into a strategy like that in formats where you get to leave decks out of play when the time comes.
Actually, let's go back to Morai for a minute. Just like totally off the cuff here. We're talking about like how to make a Morai best of one work. And if I'm not mistaken, it's Archon, Reversal, and Adaptive. Is that right? What if you came in and each player, they brought their 3 decks, and they chose a deck to play, or maybe the order is mixed up, but you also choose a format to play. And if both players choose the same format, you play that.
I see where you're going.
If both
I like
players choose a different format, you play the one that no one picked.
The left out one. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you'd assign
I
decks.
haven't thought this through. This is a total hot take here.
You'd assign
You don't need to assign decks. No, you don't need to assign them. You just bring 3 decks. And
no, you got to assign decks first, right? You got to be like, well, if it's Reversal or if it's Archon, this is the assignment. Because otherwise, yeah, I don't think you. Well, we'd have to hash through it, but I don't think you can leave deck selection until after you know the format that you're playing.
You can leave your deck selection, make your deck selection first, choose your deck, and choose your format at the same time, and you have to stick with that. That would probably be like Newton, where you're kind of encouraging people to move towards the center of power level, basically.
Oh, sorry. I mean, you would assign a deck for each format from their lineup, and then choose, and then lock in your format. Well, we'll shop it. We'll get back to it.
We're gonna shop it. Yeah, this was a total hot take. I just threw it on you out of nowhere.
Sloppy Moirai.
That's right.
Coming a crossover format. I don't know. We'll send our bill, Murph, in the mail. You know.
Love it. Okay, so there was one other part we wanted to talk about here, which was to talk about a gauntlet. And when you're testing decks, and if you are testing like a single deck that you're thinking about buying, for example, or a single deck that you're thinking about bringing to a big tournament, and you want to test it out and see if it works right, like how do you test that? Do you test it against like everyone's best decks, or do you test it out against different deck types that you could be faced with?
I'll tell you exactly what I do. I load up the deck in TCO. I go to the competitive queue. I play 20 games. I win all of them. I buy the deck, and then I subsequently lose every single game.
I basically did that. I basically did that like 2 months ago. Yeah. I was looking to make a trade, actually with Astron, who might be watching for all I know. And I really love this trade. I tested out the deck. I won literally 9 out of 9 games with it. And I tested it against some pretty good decks, against some sloppy lab work decks, some like pretty big sloppy lab work decks. And it was just clicking. I was like, I can't say no to this. And then I sealed the deal, got the deck, and I'm like, I think I'm literally like 8-11 with it since then. I'm just like, what happened here? So 9 games, note to self, is not a big enough sample size to make a meaningful decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, random games or TCO are a great way to get a feel for what a deck's trying to do, but I don't think it's a meaningful representation of how the deck's going to hold up in a like, all right, now for real, everybody bring your heat and let's throw down setting, because you're going to see a very wide range of things that aren't necessarily represented in a hex set or Archon Solar or what happened, but they are super fun and give you a great sense for how the deck does things. You know?
Yeah, I did do a gauntlet for VC, my Worlds Collide deck that I have in my hex set lineup, and it was more of a true gauntlet against, I think, pretty much exclusively sloppy lab workers. And I asked all of you guys to bring like your best decks. I remember playing specifically against Coda, AOA, Worlds Collide, Mass Mutation, probably a Dark Tidings or 2. I don't remember. And it was a good enough, like wide enough test that I felt super comfortable with it. it won about like 2/3 of the games, which was fantastic against decks that I know are like cream of the crop, and it hasn't disappointed. Like since I've acquired it, it's been fantastic for me. Lived up to the hype for me as well.
Hmm.
Whereas the random comp TCO test games that I um, did not work as well.
And I mean, I think a big part of that is like you definitely see good decks out there in TCO comp played by good players, and there's a lot of folks who are testing things that are maybe not top cut but have interesting lines, right? But you just don't know if you're getting all rocks thrown at you all day. If there's just a rock
Right.
hurling giant and you're like, man, this paper deck is the best, cannot lose, and like falls over immediately, right?
Yep.
And I guess this is another plug for the multi-deck formats, but it's a lot easier to buy a deck or to shop for a deck on the secondary market if it's filling a specific role in a lineup as opposed to needing to face all comers. Um, like Not Tonight and I, we do some gauntlet testing, like throw each other's hexed lineups actually at various decks. But even that's like you can't be comprehensive. Like you can't test everything out there, and okay, you can have a decent sense for what the competitive scene looks like, but even that it's tough to say. Even that it's tough to really say.
Yeah. And even throwing your hexad at each other's hexad without doing the banning is not a true test of what hexad's going for. Like if you just say like my six versus your six, you're going to encounter some situations that you're never going to see in NKFL just because of the bans. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good test. I think NKFL decks are definitely considered, almost gauntlet tier. So that's definitely a good test. But it's not a good representation of what NKFL is going to look like if
Yeah,
you're shopping for an NKFL piece.
yeah, it gives you a decent sense for how things hold up just on kind of the spiceometer, but not in an RPS kind of way, right? And that's so interesting to me too, because you'd think in a racing game, you could almost goldfish to get a sense for a deck, right? Like just play out your cards without an opponent and be like, yeah, this deck without opposition is going to win on turn 3 or 4. Like that should be good enough, because who gets over the line is what counts first, right? But it's so dynamic and so diverse that it just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't do
Well,
it.
the fishbowl games for me, the biggest thing that I take away from those is that like I can't believe my opponent doesn't kill the Fandangle. It's just crazy.
I played my ABR Alliance Sealed match with Flaming Hobo the other night, um, and and we were both reaping with Sutterkins, and then I was
Uh,
like, "What's going on?"
well, that was actually no, that was game two. That was
That was
your
the
like that was the
the
practice game afterwards.
yeah.
You played two games, so I watched this. They were equally ridiculous for completely different reasons.
Hmm.
Like your first game, the one that was the official game in the league, was like they had a Rocket Boots Tesmal out by turn two, and you ended up having three Radiant Truths played one at a time. And every turn, like you played the Radiant Truth, he went Brobnar and put a Ganger Chieftain next to the Tesmal to unstun it. And it was behind a taunt, and like he's probably like, I got you now. I just unstunned it during a Brobnar turn. You're screwed. And
Yep.
next turn you have another one, and it happened three turns in a row. And he was just like livid that when you played that third Radiant Truth. I was dying. I was watching that game. It was a blast. And it was closed decks, closed hands. I didn't know what was coming. I was like, oh man, he's got to handle this Tesmal somehow.
Yep.
And then the next game was like the complete opposite. Like it was the Sutterkin game where you guys both just had two or three Sutterkins out, just staring at each other like, I'm not going to fight your Sutterkins. Just reap. And then you're like, I'm not going to fight yours either.
Yep.
I'd never seen that before. It was so wild.
It was wild. It was and Flaming Homo was so a fun guy to play with. A strong competitor too. And yeah, as soon as I saw those Ganger Chieftains, I was like, all right, there's Drummernauts somewhere. They're coming.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And sure enough, he had the Drummernaut.
sure enough. But I mean, yeah, we had a blistering game and neither of us played our marquee combos. Just like, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like in game one, it was sealed list. Like I said, like you didn't know for sure that he had gang or not. He didn't know that you had Brig at all, and
Hmm.
then you're like, all right, let's just play a second game just for fun. And like you guys just pulled out all the stops. He like pulled off a gang or not on turn two, and you ended up having a Brig in response to one of them. It was just like total absurdity of alliance like coming to light right there.
Indeed. 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 Well, enough about that. I don't know. Any other hits? Any other hits you want
No,
to hit?
I think that's it. I think we hit it on the RPS. So in summary, we started by saying that RPS was good for KeyForge, and I have not seen anything in the last hour to make me change my mind. I think
Mm-mm.
it's great.
Yeah, I
I think
think it. I think it's great. The one last thing. Ooh, at the risk of opening a can of worms, I think that the RPS nature of the game is more pronounced at the high spiceometer level than on the lower end of the spectrum. Like I think when you bring lower powered decks, the D and Lux skill deck matters less as long as you're kind of both in the lower powered decks mode. Do you agree or
I
disagree?
disagree. I disagree. Like
Okay.
when we showed that the poll at the beginning of when we did the Lux Kill deck, I actually was the low person in deck, and it was specifically in the assumption that we're talking about high level games.
Mm-hmm.
I feel if you go to your weekly sealed and everyone grabs like a random AOA, um, I think that's much more deck reliant.
So not random, not like let's both pop a freshie and play. Like I'm saying, oh, let's both bring something middling. Both bring something into like,
You want to pop
ooh,
pop a freshie and play? Is that what we're gonna do?
well, maybe,
Maybe
maybe.
we should do that.
Okay. Well, first, let's first get a. We actually have two sponsors on the episode this time around, so I want to give them a shout out. So this episode of Bottom of the Beaker is also brought to you in part by 1-2 Punch, the powdery energy drink that lets you combine your favorite flavors for stunning effect. Quick Draw likes lime, JT likes cherry. Put 1 scoop in for Quick Draw, 2 scoops for JT, and you have yourself quite the refreshing beverage. Quite the refreshing beverage. And oh, so good. Love it. And love that drink. And folks who want to join us live for recordings of Bottom of the Beaker can find us right here, twitch.tv/sloppylabwork, whether it is daylight or standard time outside your window. It's 9:30 Eastern. You can find archives of our past shows and other streams over at YouTube. Search for @sloppylabwork and you'll find us there. For the very best content, scraped from the bottom of the beaker, 34? No, 57 times distilled. Search for Bottom of the Beaker in your podcatcher of choice, and you'll find us there, giving you a warm smile and a sultry wink. Anything else from you, Quick Draw?
Just thank you all for watching and stay sloppy out there.
Stay sloppy indeed. Stunning. Yeah, stunning indeed. And thank you to our sponsors.
Piranha Monkey clothing line, 1-2
Yeah,
Punch.
1-2 Punch. I like the punch. 1-2 Punch. I would drink 1-2 Punch for sure.
I want a Piranha Monkeys t-shirt right now.
I would wear a Piranha Monkeys t-shirt. All right, so what should we play this evening to showcase?
So we
Yeah.
had two ideas. We could either do a random access archives, or we could literally pop a freshie. I think you might have a Spanish Dark Tidings over there, if I'm not mistaken.
I cracked a box and all the others are spoken for.
You
So
don't have 11 other boxes sitting somewhere over there?
no, they're being mailed out, and although I could grab a random one from the one I just opened. How about that?
Yeah, we can do that. I
Okay.
just need a minute to scan this one. This will be fun.
I need a
But
number from the chat, 1 through 12, 1 through 12, and I will use the deck at that index from my most recently uploaded pool of Spanish Dark Tidings. So anyone in the chat, give me your favorite number or least favorite number between 1 and 12 inclusive, and I will use that. Or go over to a random number generator. That's not between 1 and 12. Come on. Ooh, what do we got? 11. All right. Thank you, Ketzer. We are going with deck number 11. That's actually pretty good. So, not this 53. No, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ooh, all right. 11.
So now that you got the number 11, you decided to go 11 from the bottom SAS-wise, right?
Oh, I could go that way. Oh no, it's rated by sorted by date added. Sorted by date added.
Okay. All right. That's fair then.
Yep. You think so because I would obviously scan first the decks that I was most curious about. So it's cheats all the way down. But I haven't actually played this deck yet, so this is great. True sealed.
Yeah, I'm not going to even look at DOK for this one.
Nice.
In fact, I didn't even look at the deck list to know what's in it. Um,
Can you pronounce
yeah.
the name of your deck?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is an Italian deck. I'll pronounce it in Italian, even though it's got like letters. So it would be Ecu Tremble Fornaia della Malinconia. I can't translate that for you on the spot, but Tremble Fornaia della Malinconia.
Okay. And I'm playing Esquel El Falso Arquitecto del Trio. All right, very nice. Logos Sanctum Unfathomable. So are we playing open deck lists?
Let's do closed lists.
Okay.
True sealed.
I'm gonna flash my deck on the stream real quick, so don't peek.
I have the stream closed for the moment, so don't worry.
Okay. If anybody wants to take a quick look before we jump in, got some really cool combos here that I'm excited for. Just looking at it, actually, that is a pretty cool combo of rares, and I know Ketzer's got to like that one. So all right, let's go.
You gave me too much information already.
Or I could be bluffing. Am I bluffing?
I like this deck.
All right, making a game competitive, hidden deck lists. Okay.
Yeah, this is a cool one. A little spicy.
Bring the spice.
We haven't played DT Sealed very much, have we?
No, I don't think we have. All right, just adjusting the layout so people don't have to stare at our ugly mugs while we play the game.
Yeah, my thinking face is not very flattering.
All right.
So you got Sanctum Logos Unfathomable.
Ooh, mama. This is awfully tempting. What do we got? Shadows, Untamed, Dinos. All right, I am nothing if not greedy. So we're going Logos and running the PI Swevin out there.
Nice. Well, looks like I'm gonna kill it.
Looks like a detour into shadows.
Looks like a detour to shadows.
Yeah.
Walk the plank.
Okay.
PI Swevin.
Okay. I'm gonna clear out some duders. And try not to get... Oh, that was a misclick, but we'll roll with it. I was about to say, try not to get rolled over by infighting, and then proceeded to put Zalvador to the left of Orpheon. But I meant to go to the right, but we'll go with it. It's all good. All good.
Creature control's overrated.
Overrated.
All right, let's do a Ritual of Balance. Not the good ritual, but it's a ritual at least. Let's craft my lineup in a way that makes you think that I still have infighting. And let's do a waste knot. Do I want to enrage, or do I want to gas pipes? I think I'm gonna keep the gas pipes. I like gas pipes. Big fan. And I whiffed on the draw.
Oh, I can toss the DOK link in the chat here. For folks, quick draw is not scoping it out. Or you might be watching the chat, eh?
I'm not watching the chat, actually. I don't have a
Okay.
good means of watching the chat without cheating, so
Okay, there you
all
go.
these weeks, people probably helping you out in the chat, which is why you win every week, and I wouldn't even know.
You know, it helps. All right, this could be risky, not knowing what you've got for tide manipulators.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going with it. All right, we're going to hide. Get some taunt going there.
Mm-hmm. That's a spicy deck you got there. You got some Eddy, you got Hide and Vellum, you got the Sweven,
Mm-hmm.
got some Sanctums. That's pretty solid.
It is solid. It's solid.
Okay, well, you think you're cute or something with your Amber on General Salvador?
Kill that Salvador.
I don't need to kill him.
Scoop him some more. Ooh.
Yeah, he's gonna be scooped.
Scooped and mugged and scooped and mugged. That's the worst.
And some blatant thievery for good measure.
This aggression will not stand.
There we go. Not quite a check, but I'll take it.
Will not stand, I say. Will not stand. Oh, do I want to allow you to keyfrog me? I'm so greedy, quick draw. I feel like I have to take this. I have to take this hide reap. I can't not hide reap here, right? Throw down this hydro cat.
Nice.
Reap. Okay, that's the thing. It's not a thing I wanted, but it's a thing. Okay, still could have infighting. That could be sad. There's no Grand Amelie from you, but, you know, I've got like 3 of them in here that I should play around. So let's actually throw another Sweven over there. Big old Brain Eater over there.
You did just pick your best deck, didn't you?
It was not the highest rated one of the bunch. And it's actually there are two that I've played a little bit from this box. I think I shared one with you, or at least one with you. There was the Double Evil Twin Hing's Gross deck, which has been very fun.
This is pretty cool here.
Oh, now you kill the frog for value.
And look at that.
Wow.
Good of the many.
Wow.
Oh, what a play. What a play. I didn't kill any of your creatures with that good of the many, and I don't care.
No, it was worth it. That was
definitely worth it. And the Sargasso made it even better.
I mean, yeah, the Sargasso was great there for you. What a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. I can live with that. I'm gonna get a Sweven Reap.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy it.
Yeah. I guess first I'm gonna finish this guy off. Okay. Feel bad about
all the cards you're about to draw.
Yeah. Feel bad about these cards. Raise the Tide. I will capture onto Salvador again as a champ. Let's Reap with Sweven. Oh, that's cute. That's really cute. Didn't draw a Vellum. That would have been fun. Reap. Reap. Phase shift. What could you have for board wipes? You could have the infighting. You could have crushing charge. We saw good of the many. I think I'm actually just gonna throw out the strange ordination so I don't have to awkwardly take the tide for it later.
Nice. That's solid.
I have some cool lines, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right then. Let's take the tide back. Capture a couple. Gladiodontus.
Oofa.
Carpe Venum. And let's rostrum. Move one off of that Salvador. And let's get rid of that PI.
That seems legit.
All right.
I think, is this the time? It might be the time.
Final analysis data forge.
That would be cool. No, it's time to release the omnipus.
Oh, nice.
Think about how I want to set this up. Okay, let's fight here. Throw a tentacle here. The omnipus here. We'll capture one there. Right. The Studer. Exhaust.
All right. Well, still not going to let you forge.
That's
You're
fine.
not allowed to forge.
That's fine. Having too much fun. Don't care.
Well, I'm having fun too here without any board whatsoever. Staring down the legion of tentaclids. Gonna scoop Eddie. Let's Seeker Needle Eddie. Let's ransack for 2. Big one. And walk the plank. And that's another check.
Nice. I feel like you're gonna win, but I'm gonna have more fun. And
don't know about that.
I have to do the cool play right now.
Another one?
Yeah. This is a cool play.
Now is the final analysis data forge.
All right. Sanctum. Harmonic ritual. to get the benefit of this tentacle line.
Game 5.
So cool.
It's crazy that Harmonic Ritual has a pip with it as well.
Oh! I totally. No, I didn't. I couldn't play that. What was I thinking? I should have shifting battlefield, but move my other Seabringer over. Weak.
Well, you can almost kill my Gladiodontus this turn.
Oh, funny.
Oh no, I guess not this turn. Next turn with your tentaclids, you probably could.
I mean, oh, that's funny.
Nice,
send,
very nice.
send Mad Prophet to the
6.
center. Yeah. Throw this Badge Magus between a couple of tentacles.
Not bad.
Not bad. And I'm gonna. Should I play this thing? I feel like maybe I'm gonna hold it. Maybe I'm gonna hold it.
Oh,
Let
you got
you
me forged with the mecha buoy.
let you forge. Yeah,
What do you have doing over there?
that's okay. I was I should have just taken the tide for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
I got excited. I'll admit I got excited.
yeah, you did. That's all right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go into Untamed. I'm gonna steal one. I am absolutely not going to play the Primal Relic. That's gone. I will play a nice little Mookwing though,
Okay. Okay.
and Mushroom Man.
Would have loved that waist knot. Okay, that's a red key. That's a red key. I'll take it.
Yeah, the Waste Knot came early.
Mm-hmm. Oh, as tempting as some of these other options are, I think now we just gotta omnibus
Yeah, you gotta take care of business now.
take care of business. Battle line 2 swole. Try and make sure I center. Toss that there. Fight with some of these tentacles. Reap. I guess this can still fight in.
Why not, right?
Why not? Why not? Okay. Now, there's a thing I haven't done yet. Oh,
No,
I
there's
guess I could.
not. You
I
want to
guess I
fight
could.
with the Horde sign, and that's it, right?
Yeah, I could raise the tide.
Oh, and he doesn't raise it again.
Nah.
It's like the only way I'm making money the rest of the game, probably.
Buy those extra wide playmats. Buy those extra wide playmats.
Yeah. Well, I could kill a creature. That's something, right?
It's a thing.
I have some really cool cards left in my deck, but they're not in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. I don't even know what good this is. What are you doing here? Yeah, all right. I don't know what good this is going to do me, but let's do it. Just going to steal one, play the Myliobe, and assert my dominance and make it so you can't reap with that Omnipus next turn, hopefully.
Ooh.
Well, you probably can. All you have to do is fight with some tentaclids. There you go.
Cool, cool. All right, that's blue key. Yeah. Do I have enough? DT best set. Quick Draw is rethinking that DT best set mantra.
No, I just drew the one deck with no creature control.
No creature control.
Yeah. I mean, not the only one. Dark Tidings has a decent number, but could have had like a Crushing Charge or an Infighting, or could have drawn my I Know You Didn't earlier. Could have drawn my Ostracize. You are dedicated to reaping here.
I am. Oof. All right. We'll trade there. And feel really silly if there's a KeyFrog walk-off in our future.
That would take some magic.
It would. But it would be pretty cool. 1, 2, 3, go over there. Okay.
All right.
Fourth gigantic creature. Omnipus being the fourth gigantic creature. It's not a bad thought.
Oh, I didn't even realize that Omnipus cannot fight, so the Enrage doesn't do anything.
Oh, very true.
I would have got an Amber back if I remembered that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I probably would have fought the Seabringer just that I could raise the tide and enrage the Flamegill.
Force me to rage and then you can take the tide back. Interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, archive a card that way too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, not a whole lot you can do then. Let's Dino You Didn't. Actually, no, let's not Dino You Didn't. Let's Faust first.
Cool.
Now let's Dino You Didn't.
With a capture pip.
I don't think so. No, an Amber Pip. Choose a creature. Why am I choosing a creature? Oh, you're capturing from me. Okay, let's just do that one then. That puts me at 7. That's pretty cool. Would you like my Trojan Sauropod?
Yes, please.
I should have moved this one sooner. Could have had 9 right now. And we're going to race. And I did burst. Not quite enough. Good game.
Good game. All right, so high roll from the deck with lots of creatures against the deck without lots of creatures.
I don't think I'd call that a high roll, actually. I have probably like 3C tops, and you have a lot of creatures, so I think that's probably pretty indicative of how that RPS game there is going to go.
So this was for science to demonstrate the old RPS principles at work.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm always happy to lose to you for science.
RPS in action, indeed. That was definitely the rock. Well, the deck that we played there does have quite a few creatures, 23 creatures, and some cool rares. So the Omnipus Harmonic Ritual combo is really fun, which I don't think I've ever seen before. And then there's a Mind Over Matter hanging out there too, which I don't think is as great, but I guess funny if you want to replay that Omnipus or something.
I'm going to drop the deck that I played in the chat. Mm-hmm. It actually has a 9C, which I don't understand how that could be.
9C, starting with Ostracize.
Yeah. Ostracize. Why does Ostracize have a 2C? Oh, because it purges. That doesn't seem right. Especially since you don't always want to lose one. I feel like it should have a less creature control for that reason. Seems like an odd ranking there. Good of the Many literally killed none of your creatures. I think you had like 6 out at the time too.
I
I
had
feel
a
like,
big board and it did not
yeah,
change. Yeah.
that is a card that it does less when you have less creature control to go with it.
Hmm.
Um, Two scooped is fun in there. The assert dominance killed a creature, so that's can't complain right there. Um, yeah, I was pretty pleased with that key frog, that
That
forge.
was a cool play. That was a cool play. And unfortunate not to connect the Mushroom Man and the Waste Not too. Yeah.
Yeah, I ended up killing a what was it, Myliobe, I think, and I drew nothing. So,
Oh yeah, and the Gladiodontus. Oof. Waste Not and
oh yeah,
Gladiodontus.
the
Super cool.
Gladiodontus I think came right after the Waste Not.
Hmm. Yeah, some good Waste Not options.
Yeah,
Interesting.
man. Oh, that man, drawing 8 cards with that is pretty sweet actually.
That is kind of nice. I don't know if you have any no power boosting stuff, just the relic.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and that relic ain't getting played.
Not in that game, that's for sure. Not in that
No.
game.
Yeah.
Huh. All right. Well, RPS in action. In action indeed.
There you go.
That was a fun one. Oh, I do actually have 3 creature control, just big dudes.
Yeah, how does that just 3 though? Because like I feel like each of the tentaclids should be worth something, but I guess they don't give skirmish creature control.
You'd almost want to think that the tentaclids or the skirmish combined with cannot reap would give you a nudge in the creature control department. Um, 'Cause I feel like you could make an argument for creatures that want to reap, which is pretty much everything else. Okay, so Murph saying that C does not take into account fighting. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like you maybe your default assumption is that your creatures are going to reap, and that's pretty fair.
Hmm.
A thing that cannot reap, maybe though.
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, creature bonus in the arc score is for reaping, essentially, right? And these guys can't reap, but they still get the creature bonus.
Is that right? Interesting. I do think that I think you might be right there because I feel like a number of cards that have good actions or good non-reap effects lose a bit of their creature bonus.
Yeah.
So that could be right.
So
Could
I
be
would probably, if I were redoing any of the scores, I'd probably change the tentaclid from point 0.4 creature
right.
bonus to point 0.4 creature control.
Nice. Oh yeah, we shouldn't steal all of Ketzer's thunder. Yeah, when we get them on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Ketzer is going to be on. I guess we can kind of give a spoiler for those lucky enough to be watching right now that we'll have Ketzer on in the future to talk about probably fighting and punchy decks, they say. So there you go.
I dig it. I dig
Underexplored topic. People say all you need to do is reap. We'll find out.
it. ABF. We needed CDEF to always be something fighting. Yep.
Um,
Always be card discarding and
Engaging
fighting.
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 Engaging fights.
There you go. There you go. Right on. Right
All
on.
right. Cool.
Well, we can wrap it up there. Good times. Good times.
Yeah. Good game tonight.
Good game indeed. And thanks for hanging out with us in the chat, folks. Fun times as always. We'll see you around the lab.